Good morning. Welcome to Saga Saturday. It is an overcast day here in the Bay Area. Yeah. Breathe layers in.
Is that most days in the Bay Area? Like it kind of starts as an overcast.
Well, sure. That's fine. I won't debate that or ignore it. Yeah.
I mean, it's an overcast day here in Anchorage as well. So
again,
I'm not sure. Yeah, again.
Oh, that is a big squirrel. Holy cow. Sorry. Got distracted by the giant squirrel that just tried to jump on top of my beehive. That will end poorly for you, little squirrel.
Yes, it will.
I had a cat try to knock it off of its pedestal because it's on, beehives have to be elevated. I had a cat, one of the local cats tried to knock it over the other day. That was fun. It's just going to end poorly. Anyway, enough about my squirrels and bees and other wildlife out here.
Yeah, welcome to Saga Saturday. We're transitioning into a wildlife show.
Right?
We're doing apiary. We're doing apiary sciences. We're doing wildlife. Maybe we'll talk about my herb garden and why I apparently can't grow a feverfew to save my life.
Yeah.
It's all good. It's all good.
Or maybe we're just going to stick with Egils Saga.
Yeah,
because we've been on it for so long at this point. I think we should just, keep Egils Saga forever.
Yeah.
Egils Saga to the end of time. Yes.
Anyway, I'm Ula Brenna's daughter. I'm joined here by my crazy and talented and amazing friends, Bearsay and Kidhild. And Egils Saga. Good Lord, it's still going.
I mean, the thing is though, like there's so many, it packs so much adventure in, right? Like we've reached the point in the story where we're sort of Egils' decline, but he's had this wild life. There's been boat chases that feel like they're straight out of Grand Theft, I don't know, Hedeby. There's
Grand Theft Hedeby.
Grand Theft Nautical.
Yes, there you go. That makes more sense. Grand Theft Auto.
Right.
Whatever. So thank you for that correction. So we've had the boat chases. He's ransomed back his head with a poem that was a pretty mediocre, like King Great poem, but it worked, right? Like he gets his head back. He's written this amazing poem for the death of his sons. He's fought everybody under the sun. He has attempted lawsuits repeatedly. We're gonna see the conclusion of another lawsuit here in this final stretch. But without spending 45 minutes talking about where we've been, go back and watch the last 4 episodes. And we're gonna power through this so that we don't end up doing another hour and a half on 6 chapters.
Right.
So
yeah. So this is the beginning of the end for Egil. His adventuring days are pretty much done.
He's basically retired to his farm in Iceland and is just kind of living the grumpy old man life.
And if you want to go back and watch another episode before you watch this one, you might want to watch one of our first from Gender January on Vater and Blauder, because that's also going to be on the masculine ideal. This is when Egil starts really falling out of that, which we touched on in Sonatorek, right? He starts saying, like, even if I could fight the sea to avenge the death of my son, I'm too old to do it now. Yeah. I'm too old and frail. And so this is really the beginning of his decline here.
Yep.
But he starts off, he says, well, wait a minute here. I'm still alive and I've been doing pretty okay. But it's all thanks to my best bud, my longest, most loyal friend, Arnbjorn, who we love so much. And so he composes, what was it was it just spontaneously? Sorry, guess who skimped on the reading this time around?
No, Egil hears about a change of rulers, and Arnbjorn was with Harold Eriksson, became his counselor, got lots of money from him. And Arnbjorn goes back to his estates and just like having received all this glory, and Egil hears about it and just sort of decides to compose a poem in his.
Yeah, it's not a payment for anything. It's not it's not an homage, like a death thing. It's not a praise. It's just a, hey, you're my battle bro. Here's how I think you're awesome.
And he starts the thing with, I am quick to sing a nobleman's praises. Just right off the bat, here's what we're doing. It's we love Arnbjorn.
It is a big Arnbjorn love fest.
Yeah.
And how, you know, the things that they have gone through together, and like talking about the battles that they have fought together in York. In York, the king reigned, rigid of mind, over rainy shores. You know, just all the adventures they've had together.
And it really has a big focus on the whole exchange where Arnbjorn really stuck his neck out farthest for Egil, because there were several times in which Arnbjorn sort of acted as a mediator, very much like earlier on in the saga with the past generations, the figure of Onund, who was in King Harold Fairhair's court and who sort of tried to be like the voice of reason, like, hey, calm down, quick-tempered king. People are not trying to be weird with you. Like, just chill out for a second and look at the gifts this guy brought, right? Arnbjorn was doing a lot of the same, also trying to like give Egil advice, which Egil mostly ignored, just to do his own thing. But yeah, the most he stuck his neck out was by telling the king, like, if you kill Egil right now while he's in your hall here in York, you're out of your country, you're out of favor. And this man has delivered himself into your hands. If you kill him right now, me and all of my men are your next biggest worry.
Yeah.
I'm willing, like, Arnbjorn was one of the only powerful landowners who came with King Eric to England at this time. And so this is like, you're losing your biggest support. And also, you're gonna have to fight us.
Nobody
who do
wants
you think
that.
is gonna win if your biggest chunk of your retinue is about to turn on you? So the king was really kind of like put in a tight position because Arnbjorn was so willing to throw everything behind Egil, and so Egil was like, "Let me tell you all about it." And so they talk. Most of the poem is sort of in reference to and takes you through, or like a good section of the beginning takes you through yet I ventured my poem to the king, the bed prize that Odin had slithered to claim, his frothing horn passed around to quench all men's ears, talking about the meat of poetry again. Like, it takes us through, I composed a poem. It was great. Here's what happened. This great section here. Yeah, can I help?
I just really want to really quickly. So he composes this poem, you know, and what's interesting here is, in my translation at least, people thought my poem poorly paid for, rudely rated in the royal hall. So they're like we were talking before we started filming about how self-deprecating Egil is constantly. So, you know, everybody's like, he didn't get a good gift for it. He's like, yeah, my head's ugly, but it's still on my shoulders, guys.
Right?
It was a fine gift. That was fine.
Yeah.
That was
no
good.
one praised the beauty of the prize. Like, yeah, my poetry earned in that lavish house when I accepted from the king in reward for my verse my own sable head to stand my hat upon. Saved his head, yeah. My head I won with, and with it 2 dark jewels of my beetling brow and be his eyes, and the mouth that had delivered my head's ransom at the king's knee. A field of teeth there, and my tongue I took back, and my flapping ears endowed with sound. Such a gift was prized higher than earnings gold from the famous king. And by my side, better than every other spreader of treasure, stood my loyal friend, whom I trusted, growing in stature with his every deed.
And I love, it's saying better than every spreader of treasure. A spreader of treasure, a breaker of rings, a distributor or destroyer of gold. That is a ruler. That's king specific because that's what
and Arenbjorn is better than all the kings. Arenbjorn
so
is
this
like
is really
putting
him up in stature and definitely saying Arenbjorn is better than King Eric.
Well, sure.
I mean,
and then he continues and he calls him Arenbjorn, paragon of men, who lifted me alone above the king's anger, the king's friend, who never told untruth in the warlike ruler's hall. So acknowledging the fact that Arenbjorn was only ever good and truthful to the king. He's a paragon of men because he was good and loyal and right in his duty and service to the king, as well as in his loyalty and dedication to his friendship with Egil. Like, he manages to actually thread that needle and come out on top. And what a great guy. I just love Arenbjorn too.
Arenbjorn is like the best dude.
Let's see. Yeah, and then there's some great parts that I really wanted to pull out, because then it's sort of, now that we've sort of established, here's what Arenbjorn did, here's what I did with my poetry, but this is how Arenbjorn helped, right? And let's talk about Arenbjorn for the rest of the time. And so then we get some great little plays on word. Now I kind of want to like talk about the poetic aspects of this, because we know kind of what the poem is about. Right. In the 16th verse, there's this great little pun where, so the name Arenbjorn, right? Aren means hearth and Bjorn means bear. And so you can think of Arenbjorn's name as meaning hearth bear. And so verse 16 says, first I will name. So we know we're going to be naming the man, right? We've already named him, but we're going to do it again. As most men know, and is ever borne to people's ears, how generous he always seemed, the bear whose land the birch fears.
I know,
and so we got a bear, right? So that's the Bjorn part of his name. But whose land the birch fears.
That's the fireplace, that's the hearth. That's because you throw the birch into the fire. Yeah. So I love that the play on words and the kennings in here are just, they're beautiful.
Later they call him a rock bear.
Yeah.
I may be a little bit also partial to Arenbjorn because of his name elements and what we might share.
You bear people.
But yeah, I
love verse 18. Endless wealth flows to the hands of the chosen son of Harold's line. His friends ride from far around where the world lies beneath the sky cup's winds. Yeah, that is just a great little piece of poetry.
I'm just really mad because none of this stuff is appearing in my copy.
That's what happens when we work off of different translations.
I mean, there's good stuff in here. So we've got where is it? No man is mocked in Arnbjorn's mansion for lack of luxury or late rising. He persecutes his purse, this man from Fjord province, and beats the earth with bracelets and bruises his gold. Which, not sure why
what verse is that? Which one is that?
Well, that's bruising the gold is again destroying gold, distributing. Right. It's a breaker of rings thing.
Yeah, it's the
what verse?
Third from the end. So, yeah,
third from the end. Oh, they're not numbered for you.
No,
isn't it the third from the end a defective verse?
Yeah, that's what ours says. Oh, the one before that.
Oh,
so our translation is the man in Fjorddane shows money no love. He banishes rings that drip like fruit, defies the ring-clad verse-bruised thief, hacks treasures in half, imperils brooches.
Okay,
I love that.
Show me the cover of your book again.
This is the smiley.
I'll be right back.
Let's go work off the translation.
That's a great verse. This was a great verse to point out. We have such rich mythological allusions too, as shown, as you can see in the side there. But the dripping like fruit. So we've got lots of destroyer of rings, destroyer, generous man. This is one of the pillars of Viking masculinity, of good leadership. The Man of Fjordan shows money no love. Like, showing no love, having no quarter for money, that means I am generous, I am pushing it out, get it away from me. He banishes rings that drip like fruit, referring to Draupnir. The Odin's ring, in the famous story where we get several magical items for different gods. The dwarves, Atri, I can't remember the other one's name. They make these magical items, including Freyr's boat that folds up.
A folding boat.
Odin's ring, Draupnir, which drips other rings out of it.
Right.
And Mjolnir, in fact, Thor's hammer, with its weird short haft, should have been much longer.
I wonder if that dripping rings, I'm just going to totally derail this for a second. You've seen there's extant bracelets that are, it's a bracelet, it's a ring that has other rings on it, right? Like finger rings almost.
Oh.
But they're not, they're not detachable. Like you can't use them as payment. You could cut it off, obviously, right? But I wonder if that is like an homage to a dripping ring.
Yeah, interesting. Like sort of dangling.
That. Sorry, that's my archaeological brain digging into extant pieces as opposed to poetry.
Okay, so that we're clear, this copy and this copy, the ending verse is very similar. The rest of it, there is
nothing,
no similarity at all. Like I've got and you've got one. Your verse 23 is defective. I don't have a defective verse at the end of the poem. I've got a defective verse at the middle of the poem.
We have that one too.
But
there's two defective verses, and I'm looking at the Old Norse right now.
And
no, I know.
Viewers, when we say defective, what we mean is there's pieces of it missing. It's illegible. That's what we mean by defective.
Or like part of some. Oftentimes, it's like there's literally a giant hole in the manuscript, and so we just don't have it.
Yeah.
Where'd it go?
So we're not saying it's defective because it was poorly written or something. Like there just isn't all of the words there. So
note how big the verse is here, how big this one is. They should all be that size. And then the other defective verse, it's even worse because it's like in the middle. But you can kind of get what it says.
Yeah,
it's right here, and it says, "And ... the pillar, glorifier of my deeds, which ... the scourge of Halfdan's line."
I love the scourge of Halfdan's line, but we don't know what the hell's going on there. All right, so
I would say that's either Egil referring to himself,
right?
Talking about being a scourge on the line of Norwegian kings, or it could be talking about Arnbjorn. I really think that's talking about himself, but definitely the glorifier. It's pretty clear what's going on. So does your copy just sort of get rid of all the kennings?
Well, so they do talk about stuff like it's his word mead melted every man's heart. Odin's horn sounded, his word mead melted every man's heart. So that's a little bit kenning-y. It's not quite the kenning, but yeah, it looks like it gets rid of a lot of. They do talk about great Arnbjorn's gold glides like a stream, like a flood it flows to his fellow men. So it's got some of that alliteration, which is more recognizable to me. Well, no, because we've talked about Norse poetry is also alliterative. It maintains some of that alliteration, but I think it largely gets rid of the kennings.
What sometimes happens, there's several different ways, and I'm sure, Knihild, you are also aware of this. There's a bunch of different things you can think about when you're translating, right? A translation is always imperfect. There's no such thing as a perfect translation. And that's part of why, I learned Old Norse so that I could just read it and know what it says.
Yeah.
But even then, I have a very different view of how a medieval Scandinavian would have read it and understood all of the context instantaneously. There's things that we'll never know about things. Anyway, sorry, I'm off on a tangent. The point I'm trying to make is that when you do translations, especially of poetry, you kind of have to have a goal in mind.
Yeah.
Like, what am I going for? Am I going for preserving the poetic imagery only? And so I'm going to translate it as faithfully as possible so that all of the images come out. Am I trying to translate it so that a sense of the meter or a sense of like the poetic format, so in this case, having lots of alliteration.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's having end rhymes, especially for like English poetry, right? Like wanting to preserve end rhymes because we love end rhymes in English. Like how, what am I going to do to sort of like make this work? And so you have to just sort of decide as a translator whether or not what you think as a translator is the most important part of the poetry.
Right.
Obviously, I have an opinion. You may have figured it out. I think the kennings should stay the same. I think the imagery is the most important part because I don't think you can really, like, you're going to just have to really bend and break the verses apart to make them have the right kind of alliteration. And they're definitely not going to have the right syllable count and meter. It's really hard to write Droghvite or any other Skaldic poetry in English because the language just isn't set up for it.
Yeah, exactly. It's just not the same language, you can't build the same structure. Yeah.
So I know we go like super deep and sometimes we're like really splitting hairs about like these different translations and stuff, but this is where it's coming from. It's like I find it super interesting and I'm loving looking at Kinnahild's one translation, this other translation, and I've got the Old Norse in front of me as well. So I can like try to double check on the fly, although I'll be honest, it's really hard because it is poetry. And they put all the words in the wrong order, which is part of why it's really hard to translate into English.
Okay, so I figured out part of what's going on here. My translation completely drops stanza 21. So stanza 21 says, "No man went to the long boat where Arnbjorn's bed lay at rest, led by mockery of or bitter words, or his spear's grip empty." So that is not in here at all.
Interesting.
There is this bit that I think this translator has taken that stanza and kind of dropped whole chunks of it and kept the mockery for lack of luxury or late rising. And I think that's maybe where he's pulling that from. And then he takes stanza 23, which is the defective stanza, and turns that into the beginning of the second to last stanza.
Right.
So the second to last stanza in my copy: "A fertile field in this free sown life, he has reaped his reward in the riches of battle." When you look at the defective stanza in the Sagas of the Icelanders, it reads, "The acre of this ample life was much sown with seeds of war." So I can see where that translation's copying.
Yeah.
And then my stanza continues, "Sadly, I'll have served him if the seed has given me should be wasted, not winnowed and blown in the wind," which
that's very
kind of picks up the beginning. "It would be unjust if that spreader of wealth had cast overboard on the course where the sea god's steeds trample and race." So I think that's kind of combining those two stanzas.
Yeah, but it's changing. It's interesting because they've changed the poetic. They've taken it's clear that stanza 23 is going for a field and agriculture based metaphor for generosity. And then the next stanza, 24, switches into a seaborn casting overboard. "It would be unjust if that spreader of wealth had cast overboard on the course where the sea god's steeds trample and race the many favors he has done for me." So like it changes to an ocean thing.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that they were just like, whatever, no more ocean. Let's talk about the fields.
We're just going to stick those together. Anyway, It's a fantastic poem that is just full of love for his battle bro.
Mm-hmm.
And we really could actually go all day on this one poem, but we're not gonna, friends.
No.
So
I do want to really fast. Sorry, I was 1, 2, 3.
I love you guys.
1, 2, 3.
It was
4.
and we're like, nope, we're doing this.
I was just looking for the verse that has the Arnbjorn pun, and I found it. Yeah, I don't remember what I was going to say about it, but it's great. It's there, and I found it. So
Well, why
I'll
don't you
read
say
it
the
later.
pun? You can't just leave us hanging. Say the pun.
Oh, you want to hear it in Old Norse?
No, I just which I want to read it. Which stanza is it?
Oh, 16. And I'll read it in Old Norse.
All right.
Thought telk fyrst, es flester of veit, och alþjóð sækir. Veimildgæðar monum þótti bjóða björn Birkis otar.
So interestingly, I'm pretty sure I'm picking up at least some of those words. Like Björn,
You should,
obviously,
yeah.
that one's pretty easy.
Yep.
Birki, I'm guessing that's birch.
Birkis, is
Birkis.
birch.
So this is the hearth birch.
The
hearth
word
bear. Yeah.
The word for to know, I think I got first.
Thoughty?
Say that again.
Thoughty?
Okay, that wasn't the word I thought it was, but
Veit's up in the first part.
yeah, I think that's the one I was coming up with. And then first is first.
First. Yeah.
But no, the one thing I wanted to mention was the final stanza. This is an editorial moment that I just thought was pretty interesting. So we should all be aware, right? In the Viking Age, people had slaves. That was a thing that they did. But what's interesting is my translation uses servant, which is a very different.
That's different than slave. That's very different.
So my translation says, my tongue toils, a servant at its task. I pile the praise stones, the poem rises. This other translation says, to stack my words as my speech's slave did its morning work. I have piled a mound of praise that long, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I just thought that was quite interesting that in this case, like he's talking about his mouth is the slave, or his poem is his slave, right? Like that it's doing the work that he is forcing it to. So it's not talking about a person, but the idea of slave versus servant is there's such a meaty moment there that you can have where you're like, clearly this one translator is like, which to be fair, this translation does talk about the Irish slaves and they're not like magically turned into paid servants, but
yeah. I always find it interesting whether or not a translator, and some translators just go with thrall because that's just the word in Old Norse is thrall, and so they're just like it's a
thrall. We're not going to say whether it's a slave or a servant or a
You figured out because I want to be clear, like this is not chattel slavery from that. This is a very different kind of institution than what we normally think of. Not that it's good, but it's, I think, the closest, just on a really shorthand before we move on, it's closer to indentured servitude in most people's mind than sort of chattel slavery, where you are like an owned possession of somebody, that we often think about from more modernly. So just to clarify a little bit, it's different because everything is different in the past. The history is another country.
Right. Yeah. So I want to jump into the next chapter because we're going to roll on here. Just going to roll over you guys. All right. So the next chapter, I love this one because so it goes on. It's about this guy named Einar. Einar, the son of Helgi Ottarson, the grandson, blah, 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 blah. Great guy. Einar is... he began composing poetry when he was young and was fond of learning. So one summer at the Althing, Einar went to Egil's booth and they basically had a little poetry jam, right? Conversations soon turned to poetry. They began to, both took delight in the discussion. After that, Einar made a habit of talking to Egil and great friendship developed, blah, blah. So Einar, which one is this? Einar asked Egil to tell him where his toughest ordeal had been, and Egil spoke a verse. I fought alone with 8, and twice with 11. I fed the wolf with corpses. I killed them all myself. Fiercely we swapped blades that shiver through the shields. From the tree of my arm I tossed the plated fire of death. So that's a great little synopsis of a couple of battles that Egil had been in. They promised each other friendship. They went each other's ways. Einar went and fought with Earl Hakon against King Eric's sons. And then the poet Einar Helgason was nicknamed Skalaglam, which is the bowl rattle. He composed a drapa about Earl Hakon called The Lack of Gold, which was very long. For a long time, the Earl was angry and Einar refused to listen to it. Then Einar spoke a verse. I made mead for the battle, father, while everyone slept around the noble warrior who rules the land, and now I regret it. I think that the spreader of treasure, the renowned leader, considers few poets worse than me. I was too eager to come to see him. And he spoke. So he's basically saying, yeah, sorry, buddy. Maybe I shouldn't have been, saying bad things about you. Let us seek to meet the Earl who dares to make meals for the wolf of his sword, adorn the ship's oars' sides with ornate victory shields. The warrior who swings his sword like a serpent inflicting wounds will not turn his hand to rebuff me when I find him. So Einar, the Earl is like, hey, Einar, stick around. Kind of like you now. Eventually, Einar goes back to Iceland. In the fall, he goes to Egil's farmstead for a visit. Egil is not there. He had gone up north for something. Einar stayed 3 nights waiting for him. It was not the custom to stay more than 3 nights on a visit. Then Einar
fish.
And we have
2 days. They said the same.
Exactly. House guests and fish. Neither should be around more than 3 days. We've talked about that before. About the 3 days is really your limit. Whether it is a house guest, a ghost haunting, like ghosts aren't supposed to stick around longer than 3 days either. Like 3 days is your limit. Get the hell out.
You need to have water in 3 days too.
Funny thing, yes, that is true. Einar left. Egil came back the same day, and when he went to his bed, he saw the shield. So Einar had been given this beautiful bejeweled shield by Earl Hakon, gorgeous with like inlaid treasures, overlaid with gold and embossed with jewels. And he left it on Egil's bed. Funny thing, yes.
Oops, sorry. My bad.
That's okay.
That was you.
That was me. So he left this beautiful shield on Egil's bed. And Egil's like, what the hell? That scoundrel. Does he expect me to stay awake making a poem about this shield? Fetch my horse, and I will ride after him and kill him.
I just want to say this is one of those moments where I like my translation better. Because it starts, damn the man!
Damn the man!
Damn the man, exclaimed Egil. Does he really expect? And then it goes on basically the same. But it's just
scoundrel.
That scoundrel. Damn the man.
So Einar leaves Egil this beautiful shield, bejeweled. I mean, it's a fortune here, and it's an amazingly worthy gift. But as we have talked about in gift giving, you can't just drop a gift on somebody and leave. That's actually kind of rude. You have to give the recipient an opportunity to
reciprocate.
That's the word I was looking for. I got lost on the recipient reciprocating, but yeah. So then Egil makes a drapa, which begins with this verse. It is time to light up with praise the bright bulwark I was given. The sender of generosity's message reached me at my home. I will steer the reins well of the sea king's horse, my dwarf's ship of verse. Listen to my words. And then it obviously, in theory, goes on. We don't have the rest of it. But Egil and Einar remained friends forever. So Egil didn't actually kill Einar. The shield was around. The fate of the shield that Egil took with him when we went north. He obviously was probably fighting some more people. The shield was dilapidated by then. It had been thrown in a tub of whey. Afterward, Egil had the fittings taken off, and there were 12 ounces of gold in the overlays.
Just really quickly,
whey.
That's a big whey vat. Right? Like, if you think about the standard size Viking shield, that is a big
32-inch round shield into a vat of whey. That is a lot of milk.
Second, like, how do you do that by accident? Like, again, large shield, hard to just like, oops, I was balancing. Were you using it as a lid for the whey vat and it was too small? What idiot was in charge of this and was like, oh,
I know, right?
My bad. So
seemed like a good idea at the time. Right. So I just love that the description of the shield, because again, it speaks to my archaeologically oriented brain, where I like to be able to tie the things in sagas to physical widgets, right?
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
So next we'll move on to some family stuff. One of the things that really amused me was you have Thorstein Egilson, grows up to be an exceptionally handsome man. He was fair-handed and fair-haired and fair complexioned, tall and strong. So he's the Thorolf of this generation.
He's
right?
he's a Thorolf. He's the light, not the dark broody one. Yeah.
Right. They're tall and strong and not quite in his father's way. So basically, once again, we're commenting on Egil's looks. He was a man of peace, intelligent, modest, and very easygoing. Egil doesn't like him.
Egil was not very fond of him.
Egil's like, no, this one's not mine. I'm not.
And Thorstein and Thorstein didn't like Dad much either.
Shocker.
But Thorstein loved his mama.
Yes.
Thorstein loves his mama. As he should.
I love the fact that he's just like, he's handsome. He's so beautiful, this man, so intelligent, so fair-minded. Egil doesn't like him.
And that, I'll be honest, like, once again, like, they just write it like that in the narrative. And I 100% believe that is humor, and that was taken as humor at the time. That if you were reading this book and you got to that part and you heard like, oh wow, okay, Egil's son was like great, he was awesome. Oh, Egil didn't like him. Oh yeah, that totally tracks.
Yeah, right, that totally tracks. So the reason that Thorstein we're bringing up Thorstein here is one summer Thorstein rode to the Althing while Egil stayed at home, presumably because he's getting a little decrepit. Before Thorstein left home, he and Asgard, mom, decided to take Arnbjorn's gift, the silk cloak, this beautiful, gorgeous silk cloak, out of Egil's chest, and Thorstein wore it to the thing. It was so long that it dragged along the ground, and the hem got dirty during the procession to the Law Rock. When he returned home, Asgard put the gown back where it had come from. Much later, Egil opened the chest. He discovered the gown was ruined and asked Asgard for what the explanation was. She told him the truth, and he spoke a verse. Egil spoke a verse. I had little need of an heir to use any inheritance. My son has betrayed me in my lifetime. I call that treachery. The horsemen of the sea could well have waited for other sea skiers to pile rocks over me. So basically, he's like, dude, you took my cloak while I was still alive. You should have waited till I was dead.
There's part of me that's like, guy, you just cut off the hem and rehem it. Like, it's not ruined.
I also just love the fact that it was so long that it dragged on the ground, clearly because Egil's so big.
Well, this is the cloak that they had made mention of earlier that was specially fitted for his frame, along with the other garments that Arnbjorn had made. So these are, this is from the big and tall section. Like, it's,
literally.
Yeah. And Thorstein's a little guy.
This definitely is one of like many things that happen. Like, it's one of the few times where we really get in a saga, like, to watch someone age and have like things that are like frustrating and annoying to them. Like, hey, you didn't ask me if you could use my cloak, that my best friend. I literally wrote this huge poem. You know how much this means to me.
Right?
You just took it. And you got it dirty. And you know what? I would be upset too. Like,
I would be grumpy.
Wore my clothes without asking.
I know I've gotten upset at my daughter for wearing my stuff. She lost one of the guard cloaks that I was given when I was a guard a gajillion years ago. Because she like left it by a campfire. So I'm like, I don't have that guard cloak now because you lost it. Of course, she was like 12 at the time. But, whatever.
So anyway, Asgard dies.
Egil gives up the farm, gives it to Thorstein, moves in with his a daughter and son-in-law, right? Yes,
his stepdaughter, who's the only person that's in this world that he loves. Like, it's only Thordis.
Thordis is...
Everybody else can stuff it. He's like, Thordis is cool.
Yeah.
Let's see. He brought with him the shield.
And then at the end of that,
there's more about the shield. Yeah. I'm not sure it's the same shield. No, it can't be the same shield because he had already stripped the other shield of all of the gold work. So this is another shield. And then there's a whole nother drop about this other shield. We only have the first or a stanza of it.
Yeah. I hate it when they do that. They're like, here's the first stanza, and then oh well, guess we don't get to hear the rest.
Yeah. Egil's son Thorstein lived at Borg. He had 2 sons outside of wedlock, Hrifla and Hrafn, and 10 children with Julfrid, and after they were married. one of their daughters Helga the Fair, who loved Hrafn the poet, blah, blah, blah. It's all about, we're now getting to the descendants of Egil.
Yeah, and it just does a whole bunch of begats.
Big
and
ads.
Finally, it's just like they were all great people and people of distinction. Probably
I just love that it starts with
written down.
Thorstein had 2 sons out of wedlock. Here, their names. Oh, and by the way, 10 children with his wife.
Yeah. Thorstein got around.
Got around.
This
so
is
I don't know
all happening before there's just like another little section of like a lawsuit that happens that honestly the details of are kind of inconsequential. It involves cattle grazing and axes and passing things back and forth. But it is settled by Egil in the end. And so like it's still seen like he gets to, be a voice, be a mediator and like have this power. But he, as pointed out, then Onunzioni said, "Everyone will agree, Egil, that the settlement you have made and delivered here is unjust. For my part, I have made every effort to prevent the trouble between them, but from now on, I will not restrain myself from any inconvenience I can cause to Thorstein." Because Egil was basically like, yeah, you know what? I'm the best and most powerful. And so he basically like does this like brokering of an exchange of land and stuff, because they had named him the mediator. You're the judge, you get to decide. And he decides and he settles super unfairly. Which of course just sort of ramps things up. And so we get to see like he's given this opportunity
to do the right thing.
And he immediately is like, well, what if I do whatever I want, actually, because I'm Egil and I can do that.
Well, I'm going to touch really quickly. One of the things that's noted in this paragraph or this chapter is a reference to moving days. And that's something I'm actually going to explore on my own. Again, it goes to like my archaeological and anthropological brain. So moving days are a point in the year where I'm assuming it's spring. That it's a marker of time. You're moving livestock from one field to another. You are moving houses. Like if this is where you stay in the winter, but this is where you stay in the summer. So it's noted as a mark of time that this thing has to occur before the end of moving days. But I don't know. I'm not something I'm going to look into. I don't know like when moving days are. There must be 2 a year. If you're moving one way, you must move the other way in the fall, right? Anyway, I just thought the moving days, and this is the only time I've seen a reference to moving days. But
so I also really briefly want to at the start of Egil's verdict, we've talked about this a couple of times now, but Egil says, "Are Steinar and his father Onund here and able to follow what I say?" And they say they were. So this is another one of those moments where, if you're making an official pronouncement, you have to check first, or at least in this saga, right? Everybody checks first. So we had this with some of the formal duels. Or he's like, is he here? Can he hear me? And then if that person responds yes, then you make the formal challenge, right?
Yep.
And it's kind of that same moment where it's like, which makes sense. So I've been to Tengvalar, the assembly field, right? And it's just this big flat open field. And when the winds pick up, I don't know how to tell you, like there's mountains in Iceland to stop them, but this is like you come down a channel and then it's just a big plain. Right. And so I imagine, it can get probably very windy. You've got a bunch of people gathered there for the assembly, so it probably gets loud. You've got various animals, horses that people rode, probably sheep that they've brought in to trade or something. So it's loud. So I can understand why you would need to say, "Can you hear me?" and get that validation that presumably the witnesses who are attending this can also attest later that this person really said that. So now it is the onus falls to the person hearing the thing to pay heed, right? Like this is that moment in court when they're like, "Oye, oye," all draw an eye and pay heed, except for nobody's like, "Can you all hear me now?" Right? Like it's not that give and take. It's just assumed that when the shouty person gets shouty, that
right.
So yeah, that's what I wanted to mention there. I thought this was actually kind of interesting for people who are interested in legal history. I thought this was a really neat little passage because the setup of the case doesn't matter as much, but if you want to think about law decisions in Commonwealth Iceland, because this is in a period before they have the king's justice coming down. So this is this very democratic kind of justice where it's like, I'm appointing this person to be the mediator and we're all going to agree to abide by what the mediator decides, even if in this case the mediator's like, give it to my son.
A little biased. Yeah. So if you're interested in Icelandic law, and the Icelandic laws are some of the most well documented. They're much more documented than the rest of Scandinavia. Blood taking and peacemaking, feudal law and society in Saga Iceland by William Ian Miller is there we go. This is an awesome book about all of this. Like if you've got a question on how something should be adjudicated in Iceland in 955, like, yep, that's the.
We all have a copy. Mine's over there.
God, we're all such nerds. Oh my God.
I got mine for free.
Lame. It's not lame. It's very good for you.
Mine says $21, but I doubt that I actually paid $21 for this. But I don't know, maybe.
So anyway, moving on in the story, Thorstein gets some warnings. People come after him. This is basically we're still like because the disagreement, because the settlement that Egil proposed was not equitable in everybody's eyes. Like things continue to kind of fester. Thorstein Thorstein gets a warning, and then Thorstein and Steiner kind of light off for a bit.
This is one of those
kids.
This is one of those moments that in other sagas, like this would be actually way towards the beginning of like setting it up and being like, here's why the feud didn't get resolved at all of the points that it should have gotten resolved.
Right.
So this is like like the feud's gonna keep going. We've already been to court and done a whole thing, and that failed. And now we still have ill will. We haven't settled this at all. We're gonna be butting heads, and people might die because things are ramping up. Escalation rather than de-escalation in this port.
So,
but yeah,
it kind of leaves it off there. They're trying to figure it out, but Thorstein and Egil get together. They had plenty to say about their kinsman Thorgeir Blund, who's another guy who showed up in this feud. And they were in complete agreement about everything. And Egil makes a verse. Time was when I tricked the troublesome Steinar. I thought to help Thorgeir and earn his thanks, but that fellow failed me. For all his fine promises, why he sought to cause suffering, I'll never understand. Is the version that I have. But then it just sort of like it wraps it up. Like it closes. It's like we've talked about this enough. We're done, and we move on to one more humorous episode with Egil, and then. Sorry, go ahead.
Right before we get there, I do want to point out a chapter before this. A very key thing happens that helps de-escalate. You'd think, like I said, in a normal saga, this is like, like things are about to get much worse. People are going to die. We've got Thorstein's going on a trip somewhere, and blah, blah, blah. He ends up changing his course. Then go and tell him to go to Borg if he has any business with me, said Thorstein. I will ride home now. And then he did that. Later, word went around that Steinar Sjónason had been lying in wait on Einkunnir with 11 men that day. Thorstein pretended not to know, and everything remained quiet afterwards.
There was an ambush. Yeah, there was an ambush set up, and he didn't fall into it. He's like, we're just going to stop this now. Because he could have just kept going and gone into the ambush, and the feud could have kept going. And he's like, we're just going to pretend that didn't happen.
It's very important that it was rumors going around, because that's something that you can pretend you don't hear, you can pretend you didn't know. Whereas something like in that law court, does so-and-so hear me? Yes. Are you witnessing this? Is it witnessed that people... And so Thorstein can be just like, it's not bad looking on my honor, because he's duty-bound. He's honor-bound to respond.
Yes.
If he knew that there was an ambush.
Right.
He knows that they were going to attack him, and so he's supposed to go and attack them. But if he just,
It was a rumor. I didn't think it was true. Yeah, you get to keep your honor in that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then everyone starts settling down.
We're starting
still got ramped up pretty high, so that's why it takes a whole chapter and a half to get there.
Right. So Egil at this point has lived a long life, but in his old age, he grew very frail, and both his hearing and sight failed. He also suffered from very stiff legs. Egil was living at Mosfell with Grim and Thordis. One day, Egil was walking outdoors alongside the wall when he stumbled and fell. Some women saw this, laughed at him, and said, "You're completely finished, Egil, now that you fall over of your own accord." Grim replied, "Women made less fun of us when we were younger, and I expect they find little value in our womanizing now." Dude, we didn't like it then, but whatever. So this is where Egil is in his old age is going to.
You have left off the best part of that passage, which is Egil's verse.
Oh, I haven't gotten to that yet. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
Egil then said things had reached that pass, and he spoke a verse. "My head bobs like a bridled horse; it plunges badly into woe. My middle leg both droops and drips, while both my ears are dry."
So here's my translation.
You might want to get some penicillin for that.
Here's my translation. My bald pate bobs and blunders, and I bang it when I fall. My cock's gone soft and clammy, and I can't hear when they call.
Oh, they made it rhyme.
Oh, I love it. I actually love both.
I like middle leg a lot, though.
Middle leg,
that's pretty good.
Droops and drips. That is just.
My ears are dry. Ooh.
I don't know which is worse though. Droops and drips or gone soft and clammy. Like neither of those is
Neither
good.
of those are things that anybody wants.
Also, Egil, shut up.
Is it dripping from a sexually transmitted disease or incontinence or, whatever the reason?
I think it's incontinence. Egil, I don't want to know. No one wants to know.
No one wants to know. Right. So at this point, Egil is completely blind. He's trying to warm himself by the fire because he's so cold and frail. The cook says it's astonishing for a man who had been as great as Egil to lie around under people's feet and stop them from doing work. "Don't grudge me that I warm myself by the fire. We should make more room for each other. Stand up," she said, "and go off to your bed and let us get on with our work." Egil stood up, went off to his bed, and spoke this verse. "Blind I wander to sit by the fire. Ask the flame maiden for peace. Such affliction I bear on the border where my eyebrows cross. Once when the land-rich king took pleasure in my words, he granted me the hoard that giants warded gold." So he's fallen from this great hero to just a wretch by the fire. And that is not a way for a man to go. You gotta, he did not go in battle. He did not.
It's the absolute. So he had been absolutely Vater, and now he's become absolutely.
And now he's absolute blather. He's just like the bottom of the bottom, which is it's sad, even though he's a grumpy, ugly old man.
So we do. I forgot about this incident, but we have one more comedic incident.
Yes, this is so good.
Yeah. So Egil, having fallen so far, Egil's now looking to just basically be a pain in everybody's ass and have some fun. Like he's like, look,
This reminds me of my own grandfather towards the end. There was a point where he's just like, "I'm a crotchety old man. There's nothing you can do about it." And I'm like, "Yep, you're right, Grandpa."
So
You're not going to treat me with any respect. Well, you know what? I won't be respectful.
So Thordis goes to Egil, whose greatest pleasure was to talk to her. So Egil just adores Thordis, and he's, she's the apple of his eye, and all his other kids are just like, that asshole. So it's true, kinsman. Do you want to ride to the All-Thing? I'd like to know what you have in mind. I'll tell you what's on my mind, he said. I want to take my 2 coffers with me, the ones I got from King Athelstan, both full of English silver. I want them carried up to the Law Rock when the crowd gathered there is at its biggest, and I'm going to throw the silver about, and it will be a big surprise to me if people agree to divide the silver evenly.
He wants to start a brawl at the All-Thing, just for the hell of it, because he's old and grumpy.
So Thordis, that's a great idea, said Thordis. And as long as people live here in the land, they'll remember it. So his name will live on because he caused this fight. And then she will have a word with Grim. and told him what Egil was planning to do. It's an absolutely crazy idea, she said. He mustn't be allowed to do it. So like to her decrepit, aged father, she's like, that's a wonderful idea, Daddy. I love you so much. And
so generous and lovely. And goes to her husband, he's like, you cannot let this happen.
And then
I fully expect to have this life with my dad at some point. Like my dad will be like, I have this great idea. And I'll be like, yeah, Dad, that's awesome. And then I'll call my sister. No.
You cannot let this happen.
How was your translation? How did they do what she said, Thordis? Or did it say he's crazy? Because in our translation it says he must never be allowed to get away with such a mad scheme.
So it's in mine. It's an absolutely crazy idea. She said he mustn't be allowed to do it.
That's so good. Yeah. And then Egil brings up going to the thing with Grim, and it says Grim would have none of it. So Egil stayed at home while the thing was held. He was displeased and wore a rather grumpy look.
So I'm picturing this ugly, decrepit, incontinent old man sitting by the fire in his cloak, just being, they wouldn't let me go and cause a brawl. And
probably his eyebrows going up and down. Oh my God.
So he's still got the silver then, which is the silver that's caused all sorts of problems. It started the fight with it contributed to the fight with his dad and all this kind of stuff. And finally, he's like, you know what? I'm so pissed at that. Like he would probably, if he'd been allowed to go to the All thing, he probably would have given some of this silver to Thordis. Like he just loves Thordis so much, right? Instead, what he does is he takes his treasure and he takes 2 of Grim's slaves and they go out to east of the fence at Mosefell. There's this ravine that plunges down from the top of the hill. He goes out there and he comes back sans chests and sans slaves
and sans horse
and sans horse
wandering on foot. And remember, his knees are super stiff. He can't bend his knees really anymore.
So just like his father, he went out and buried his treasure where nobody can find it,
and then killed all witnesses,
including
the horse. What the hell, dude? And the thing is, he's blind too now, and so he gets lost. He doesn't know how to get back, and so he just kind of wanders around. And they find him when they get back from the thing. They're just like, "Who's that guy over on the hill over there? Wait a minute." That's Dad?
Dad, what are you, so Dad's like, I'm picturing like the poor senile men that wander away from the nursing homes and are found, at the 7-Eleven. I'm like,
does California have a silver alert system?
Yes.
Okay. So this is like the ultimate silver alert. Right? Like you had Egil wander off with his silver to hide it. Right. And they've got to call around to the neighbors like, has anybody seen Dad? Real ugly, big guy, hard to miss. Oh, there he is. So anyway.
And then that fall, Egil caught an illness that eventually led to his death.
But before that, we have a little bit of ooh-hoo-hoo. Egil's so cool. And look, there's buried treasure. Where did he put it? Everyone loves a buried treasure thing. And so we also get a little bit of mystical things going on. On the south side of the rivers are hot springs with big pits nearby where some people believe Egil must have hidden his treasure because a will-o'-the-wisp is often seen there. Egil himself said he had killed Grimm's slaves and hidden his treasure somewhere, but he never told a single person where it was. And then he catches the illness and dies. They dress him in fine clothes. They take him over to Tjaldanas and made a mound, and they bury him in it along with his weapons and clothes, as befitting a good Viking warrior. And then the last chapter is a great little section where we get to talk about Christianity.
Right.
Descendants and Christianization. And it's connecting specifically to a particular priest. And it seems, so Grim from Mosfell, who wasn't Grim's the husband.
Grim is Thordis's husband. Yes.
Thordis's husband is Thordis.
Thordis. Okay, so Thordis is Egils' foster / stepdaughter.
Right.
And so Grimm is his son-in-law, for lack of a better.
Right.
Son-in-law by
Okay, so
adoption.
none of them are actually like
blood
related to
no
each
blood
other.
relations.
But we get this really interesting genealogy section about Grimm and rather than Egil. And this is in here. Some of the thoughts about why this particular thing is how we end Egils Saga. It has nothing to do with Egil. It's literally 2 paragraphs. And it's just like Grimm from Muspel was baptized. And then they moved Egil's bones to the church. We get a little bit more of Egil and his bones. Oh, we found human bones under an altar, and they were much larger than normal bones. And so on the basis of the accounts, we were like, that's probably Egil because he's big. And then the priest there picks up Egil's skull, puts it on the wall of the churchyard. It's astonishingly large, even more incredible for its weight. And it was ridged on the outside like a scallop shell. Curious to test its thickness, Skafty took a fair-sized hand axe in one hand and struck the skull with it as hard as he could to try to break it. A white mark was left where he struck the skull, but it neither dented nor cracked. This goes to prove that such a skull would not have been easy for weak men to damage when it was covered with hair and skin. Egil's bones were buried by the edge of the churchyard at Muspel. So it's like this odd little section at the end to sort of be like, and if you thought that this seemed really unreasonably weird for some guy to be this powerful and this strong, well, look at what we found out about his bones.
Right. Clearly was, some sort of,
it's explainable. And I love this part because first off, it's crazy that anyone would be like, let me see how thick this is.
Right?
and then it's also it reminds me of the last paragraph in one of my favorite later period like romances, that were translated from Old French into Old Norse, including Tristram's Saga, where we get the story of Tristan and Isolde. Mm-hmm. There is no extant full version of that story in French. It's the Old Norse version where we get that from, by the way.
Oh, interesting.
That's the fullest version of that story is Tristram's Saga. But they Biscleret, he's a werewolf. I love werewolves. And at the end of the saga of Biscleret, the author or the translator or the copier at some point was like, okay, I know you just read a whole thing about werewolves, and you might be thinking to yourself, I don't believe werewolves are real, but you know what? My cousin saw a werewolf once, and here's what happened, and that proves it. It's true. Right. Werewolves are real. Biscleret could have happened.
Yep.
So really quickly on Biscleret, I think I have a translation of Marie de France's Lay. So a future episode we could do is comparing Marie de France with the Biscleret saga, and I think that'd be a lot of fun. Personally.
I love Biscleret so much.
It's like I love Marie de France's Lays. I think they're a good time generally.
Yes. I don't even know what the hell you two were talking about. So clearly I'm behind it.
Marie de France, I always get her mixed up. So the Duchess of Aquitaine, Eleanor of Aquitaine. So Eleanor has a daughter named Marie, but Marie de France is not Eleanor's daughter, and I always get those wires crossed. But she's a she's a trouvera, a poetess in the court of Eleanor of Aquitaine, and she wrote a whole bunch of different lays. They're in this like 12th century French. It's part of that flowering of the Aquitaine court, and they get. They're just these long poems, and they're not really great. Like, they don't treat women super well. There's a lot of cases where the women are just like, you have to suffer a lot, lady. and by suffering you will find a good husband. And you're just like, I don't think that's how that works. But
the virtuous Christian suffering of,
right,
there's lots of layers.
but they're fun sagas. There's totally worth doing. One other thing I wanted to mention was I was curious. So we talked about with Skallagrim, he gets buried way away from the family, right?
Yes.
Like take him far away. And so I was kind of curious, like Egil,
but he died an unnatural death.
He does have an unnatural death, but he doesn't have Egil doesn't have the same kind of violent. He has a violent life, but he's not the asshole that his father was, right?
Right.
And so, but I was curious still, like how far away is Galderness from Mosafel? It's less than 2 miles.
Yeah.
So this is like they don't even try. They're just like, yeah, we just took him to the other field and made a mound.
Yeah, he seemed fine. He really got he got it out in those last few years. You know, he got the grump out on us for sure. He robbed us of our inheritance, that's for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think look at that. We're actually like basically an hour. Look at us go. Woo. So after 5 episodes on Egils Saga, we are going to come back next week with our actual like final wrap up, and where I'm going to do some research on like how many I'm going to do body counts and all, you know, I want to like hit on this feud started and ended, you know, there's a lot of like moving pieces. And I'm hoping to tie some of it into what we know of archaeological information and tying it to other sagas. We know that
I might talk about that
references Hakon Saga. Like, what are the other tie-ins and connections? Because this is one of maybe the richest, longest sagas that I can think of.
Second longest saga.
Yeah.
Egils Saga's longer.
Right.
And it's huge. Significant.
Huge. So you know what? I know we've gone on for a really long time about Egils Saga, but there's just so much cool stuff in here.
So we'll go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to. Here's Egils Saga, second longest. Here's Egils Saga.
Right.
So,
I'm super envious of those books that you have. Those are beautiful.
He's like, my precious. So we'll come back. We'll do a wrap up talking about some of the like literary criticism type stuff that we didn't really get into much because we were just trying to cover the story.
Right.
And then we're going to take a week off to figure out what we want to do next. And then we'll probably come back with a couple of short, like either hit the thoughters or something like that. Do a couple of short episodes, and then we might.
Then we might tackle another.
Build back up to a month.
Another long one.
Yeah. But you know, take a little time to deal with planting. Well, okay. We're starting planting here. We're just starting to harden off our plants. You guys are like, it's 80 degrees. So right.
It's true. All right. Well, again, thank you both. You guys are always super awesome. I love our nerding time. Saturday morning nerd time is one of my favorite times of the week. Gets me through some of the other crap that happens. So we will see everybody next week for our final, really, truly final episode on Egil.
Bye.